I got home around 3 in the damn morning, dead tired after a 13-day haul from LA to Jersey and back. All I wanted was to shower, eat half a pizza, and pass out in my chair with the dog snoring at my feet. But instead, I found crime scene vibes in my driveway. My truck, my rig, my Peterbilt 389 I'd spent half my life paying off, was sitting crooked under a half-collapsed metal frame, the custom-built steel canopy I'd welded together with my own 2 hands. Torn down. Bent supports, anchor bolts yanked out of the concrete, one of the solar floods dangling like a noose, and taped to my fence post, flapping in the wind like a damn eviction notice, was this smug little printed sheet: Notice of Removal, Unapproved Structure, Action Taken. Per HOA Resolution 03.14-A. Cedar Bluffs Homeowners Association. No warning, no call, no fine, nothing. Just came onto my property and ripped it apart. I just stood there for a second, staring at the wreck. Didn't even feel mad yet, just empty. Then I took off my cap, looked up at the stars like maybe one of them had an answer, and muttered, "Alright, so that's how we're playing it." I bought the house in Cedar Bluffs 5 years ago, wanted a base, somewhere quiet to come home to after weeks on the road. My wife, Sarah, wanted trees. I wanted a flat driveway for the truck. This place had both. Quarter-acre lot, decent garage, and enough room in the side yard to park the rig without pissing off the neighbors, or so I thought. I'd never dealt with an HOA before, figured it was mostly lawn signs and people bickering over mailbox colors. First 6 months, not a peep. Folks waved, I waved back, and nobody said a word about my truck. But then I built the canopy. Nothing fancy, just a tall metal frame with a solid roof so the sun wouldn't cook the cab while I was home. Did it all myself. Anchored it into the slab, ran a power line for the block heater, even made it match the color of the house. Took 2 weekends. I was proud of it. Still am, honestly. About a week later, I get this letter in the mail with more legal jargon than a tax return. Said the structure was unapproved, aesthetic violation, blah blah. Gave me 10 days to voluntarily remove the structure or face fines. I wrote back, said I'd be happy to talk it out. Maybe there was a form I missed, right? I'm not trying to cause problems. I just need somewhere to park my truck that isn't a mile away behind a chain link fence surrounded by crackheads. Never heard back. Thought maybe they'd let it go. Turns out they were just loading the chamber. First time I actually met the guy, Richard Beaumont, HOA president for life or whatever, was right after I got back from a Texas run. I'd been gone 10 days, it was hot as hell, and I was elbow deep under the hood trying to figure out why my block heater was kicking the breaker. I hear this throat clear behind me. Real theatrical. Turn around and there's this tall guy, silver hair slicked back, polos tucked tighter than a recruit at inspection, holding a clipboard like it's a Bible. He goes, "Mr. McAllen, I presume?" I say, "Yeah, can I help you?" He looks at my canopy, then at the truck, then down at his damn clipboard like he's reviewing my criminal record. "You're in violation of multiple provisions of the Cedar Bluffs Architectural Guidelines," he says, deadpan. "The structure you've erected does not conform to the approved color palette, exceeds height limits, and was constructed without submission of Form 14C or receiving Architectural Committee approval." I wipe my hands on a rag, trying real hard not to say what I'm thinking. "You mean the truck cover?" I ask. "The industrial structure, yes." That rubbed me the wrong way. Industrial structure. Man, it was a damn canopy, not a warehouse. I built it to match the house. It didn't even stick above the fence line from the road. I tell him, "Well, nobody told me about a Form 14 whatever. I emailed back in March about this. Got no response." He smiles, but the kind of smile you give someone right before you fire them. Non-response does not imply approval. Rules are rules, Mr. McAllen. We must maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. Then he hands me a printed notice like he's serving a subpoena. Notice of violation, unauthorized construction. Immediate action required. Daily fines will begin accumulating at $100 per day starting June 1st. Then, without even a goodbye, he turns around and walks off like he's just delivered divine justice. The dude had all the warmth of a DMV printer. I stood there holding that notice, heart pounding like I'd just lost in court. My jaw clenched so tight it cracked. I'd seen control freaks before. I've driven for corporate logistics, believe me, but this guy, he wasn't just enforcing rules, he wanted me gone. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about the canopy. It wasn't about color palettes or forms or guidelines. This guy saw me, calloused hands, worn boots, diesel-stained hoodie, and decided I didn't belong. I wasn't curated enough for his pristine little suburban snow globe. That was the first shot. I didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a fine. It was a declaration of war. So at first, I figured I'd just eat the fine while I figured things out. I wasn't going to tear down a canopy I'd poured $6,000 and 2 weekends into just because some retired lawyer had a grudge against sheet metal. But man, they turned up the heat fast. A week later, I get another letter. This one's in a bright red envelope like it's a damn parking ticket from hell. Second notice, continued non-compliance. The fines had started, $100 a day, just like Richard said, $700 in a week for literally doing nothing. That's groceries, fuel, and my wife's insulin copay. Then came the photos. Yeah, someone, probably Richard himself, had taken pictures of my truck, my yard, even my damn dog sleeping in the shade, and included them in the notice like I was under surveillance. I emailed the HOA, called, wrote a letter, nothing. No reply, just more fines. But it wasn't until I came home from a delivery in Nashville that I realized this wasn't just bureaucracy, it was personal. The floodlight I'd installed under the canopy? Smashed. Wire pulled clean out of the conduit like someone yanked it on purpose. The bolts anchoring the south post? Loosened. Not rusted. Loosened. And you know how I know it was deliberate? Because I use locking nuts. Nobody accidentally spins off a locking nut with a crescent wrench. I asked my neighbor, Curtis, older guy, retired Air Force, if he'd seen anything. He just looked down and said, "They've been sniffing around your yard while you're out, TJ. I heard the board authorized inspection visits. Said you were in violation of something structural and they needed to assess." No notice, no permission, no knock. They just came onto my property like they owned it. That's when the canopy started sagging. One corner dropped half an inch, barely noticeable unless you're me. I measured that thing a dozen times before welding. Someone had tampered with the frame, so I put up a camera, nothing fancy, just a little battery-powered motion sensor job tucked into the corner of my rain gutter. And sure enough, 3 nights later, 3:12 a.m., 2 guys in safety vests and flashlights poking around near the back post. One of them looked just like Richard's pet board member, that skinny guy with the Bluetooth always volunteering. I took screenshots, sent them to the HOA email, no reply. Then the cherry on top? I come back from hauling a freezer load to Omaha and there's a bright yellow sign staked in my front yard. Cedar Bluffs HOA has declared this property non-compliant. Improvements in violation of community standards. They posted me like I was a health code violation at a greasy diner. Sarah, my wife, just stood there looking at it, didn't say a word. She's tough, but this got to her. Our daughter wouldn't even bring her friends over after school anymore. Said kids' parents were talking about our house. That's when it stopped being about the canopy. They weren't just fining me, they were trying to shame me, humiliate me, make an example out of me so nobody else in the neighborhood got any bright ideas about standing up. But here's the thing, you push a man too far, especially one who's been up for 22 hours, lived off gas station hot dogs, and rebuilt a Cummins diesel in a Walmart parking lot, you'd better hope he breaks. Because if he doesn't, he gets real focused. And that was the last day I played nice. First thing I did was go by the HOA office in person. It's this little room in the clubhouse that smells like stale printer ink and disappointment. I walked in during their office hours, which are, by the way, 2 days a week from 10 to noon. Convenient for people who don't work, I guess. Lady behind the desk, Pam I think, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I asked to speak with the board about the fines, the damage to my property, and the sign in my yard. She blinked twice like she'd just come out of a trance and goes, "You'll need to submit a request to appear at the next hearing." "When's that?" I ask. "First Tuesday of next month." "It's the 3rd right now." "Right, so 5 weeks. I just stared at her. 5 weeks, while they rack up fines at $100 a day and post public shaming signs in my lawn like I'm a leper from biblical times. Fine, I played the game. I printed out every photo I had of the canopy, photos of me building it, copies of the emails I sent, a written statement, even a notarized letter from my neighbor Curtis saying he'd seen people trespassing. I put it all in a binder labeled McAllen v. HOA because yeah, I've got a petty streak when I'm pushed. Sent it to the board, hand-delivered a copy, mailed one, certified. Still, no response. So I figured maybe I escalate a little, legally. Found a local property attorney, recommended by a guy I haul parts with. She was younger, sharp, and didn't talk down to me like most lawyers do when they hear truck driver. She reads through the HOA bylaws and goes, "Actually, TJ, they screwed up." Turns out the board is supposed to give 30 days notice before initiating any enforcement action that involves structural removal. That includes removal by contract. Guess what they didn't do? But here's the kicker. When we filed a formal complaint and request for mediation, the board just didn't show. Like they think they're above the law or too busy counting pine needles on lawns to deal with real problems. The lawyer sent a second letter, got a response this time, alright, 4 pages of corporate-sounding garbage that basically said I was a repeat violator and therefore not entitled to mediation because I had a history of non-compliance. History? I'd painted the house the same color it already was and mowed my damn lawn weekly. The only thing on my record was the canopy, which I tried to handle by the book. Next, I tried going to the HOA meeting myself. Stood up, calm as I could manage, told them what happened, showed photos, explained the cost of the damage. Richard wouldn't even look at me, just kept tapping his pen on the desk like I was wasting his time. Then he leaned into the mic and said, "This forum is not for individual grievance airing. We've followed procedure. If you disagree, you're free to pursue private legal channels." Which in HOA speak basically means, go screw yourself. So I sat back down. And the wildest thing? After the meeting, 3 neighbors pulled me aside, quiet voices looking over their shoulders like they were planning a prison break. "We're with you, man. We just can't say anything." They fined me $500 for having a garden hose visible from the street. My wife cried for a week after they made us tear out our front swing. That's when the dots started connecting. This wasn't just about my canopy. This was about fear. These people were afraid of the HOA, afraid of Richard, afraid of retaliation. And once I saw that, man, something in me just locked in. Because I've been up against bigger bullies than this. Corporate dispatchers who treat drivers like robots, warehouse guys who throw paperwork in your face, DOT inspectors with god complexes. But this was personal. This was home. So yeah, I tried to play by the rules. I tried their forums, their hearings, their polite little games. Now it was time to fight my way. Smart, quiet, and mean as hell if I had to be. So here's where everything flipped. One night, I'm sitting in the garage going over HOA documents again. Yeah, I'd officially become that guy. The one who spends his Friday nights drinking Coors and reading bylaws by LED light. Sarah had gone to bed already, but I couldn't sleep. That canopy, the fines, the way Richard talked down to me, it was eating me alive. I'd been through their rules a dozen times, but this time I started wondering about the money, like where does it all go? I pay $178 a month in dues, times that by 138 homes in the subdivision, that's $24,000 plus a month, close to $300,000 a year. And we've got what, some shrubs and a fountain that hasn't worked since I moved in? That didn't add up. So I called Curtis, my neighbor, the retired Air Force guy. What I didn't know until then? He used to be a forensic accountant for the DoD. Yeah, guy used to audit contractors for black budget weapons programs and now spends his mornings feeding birds. I told him what I was seeing. He goes, "Bring me everything." Next morning, I show up at his house with a binder full of HOA newsletters, budget breakdowns, and a flash drive of everything I downloaded from their website. 3 days later, he calls me, and his voice is different, like dead serious. "TJ, you sitting down?" "Yeah." "You're not the only one they've screwed. This entire HOA is a damn shell game." Turns out, Curtis traced years of financial reports and none of it lined up. Landscaping expenses listed under 2 different vendor names with near identical amounts. Same address, different LLCs. Payments for legal consulting to a firm registered in Richard Beaumont's wife's maiden name. Monthly fees going to a security patrol no one had ever seen. He even found that Richard had quietly rewritten part of the bylaws last year, changing quorum rules so the board could pass resolutions with only 2 votes present, as long as notice had been attempted. Basically gave himself the ability to pass anything he wanted in an empty room. And the cherry on top? Richard had been cutting himself a check, every month, titled Management Stipend. HOA rules said the board was volunteer only, but there he was, collecting $2,500 a month, tax-free, undisclosed, off the books. That's $30,000 a year, same as what I earn on some cross-country hauls. Curtis had it all: screenshots, registry info, business filings, matching EINs. Guy even made a spreadsheet with color-coded highlights like this was a Senate hearing. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. The biggest one? There was an anonymous comment on the HOA Facebook group, buried in an old thread, where someone said, "If you speak up, they'll fine you into submission, just like they did to Travis." That thread was 6 months old. Before the canopy, meaning they'd already had me on a list. I wasn't the beginning, I was just the next one. This wasn't about violations, it was control, intimidation, and cash. They saw the truck, saw the canopy, saw me, decided I didn't fit the aesthetic, that I wouldn't fight back, that I'd be easy money and a public warning to the rest. Well, they were half right. I am public now. But I'm nobody's warning. I'm the test case, and I was about to make it real hard for them to ever pull this crap again. Alright, so now I had two things. One hell of a motive and a folder full of proof. Problem was, going straight at Richard with all this, that'd just trigger their legal machine. He'd deny, lawyer up, call it a clerical error, or blame the treasurer, or claim Curtis's data was incomplete. They'd stall it out until we were both broke or dead. No, I needed to hit him smarter, slower, death by 1,000 cuts. So I made a plan, not some Hollywood revenge montage, just methodical steps, tight, quiet, and mean enough to matter. Step 1. Organize the quiet ones. I already knew some neighbors were on my side. The trick was getting them to talk without spooking them. So I printed flyers. Not with my name, not with rants, just a plain sheet that said, "Are you frustrated with Cedar Bluff's HOA? You're not alone. Join the discussion. realbluffs@protonmail.com. I dropped one in every mailbox during my evening dog walks. Nobody saw me. I used gloves. I even wore a different jacket. Old trucker habits die hard. Within 4 days, I had 22 emails. By the end of the week, 41. People poured out stories like I'd opened a damn confession booth, fines for flower pots, fines for too many wind chimes. One guy got dinged $600 because his 12-year-old son had left a skateboard on the front porch overnight. I put together a spreadsheet of violations. Curtis helped me chart patterns, who was getting fined, when, and for what. Want to guess the trend? Every person who'd spoken out at a board meeting got a violation within 30 days. Every single one. Step 2. Prep the nuke. While all that was happening, Curtis and I built a disclosure packet. We're talking 50 pages, copies of checks, LLC registry documents, altered bylaws, payment history, screenshots from the Facebook group, and a timeline showing exactly when Richard's personal payout started. It's a communication submitted coincidentally 2 months after he passed his emergency powers clause. I ran it all past my lawyer just to make sure nothing we were saying would come back to bite us. She said, "TJ, if this was a corporate board, half of these people would be in handcuffs already." Perfect. Step 3. Secure the forum. I found out the HOA's annual budget review meeting was coming up. Public, mandatory, whole neighborhood invited. Normally 5 people show up and 2 of them are board members, but this time, I had plans. I made another flyer, a little less polite. Is the HOA abusing your money? Come see for yourself. Annual budget meeting, Thursday, 7 p.m. Bring a neighbor, bring your questions, bring a seatbelt. Printed 140 of them. Dropped them on driveways after dark like Santa Claus with a grudge. Taped one to the mailbox at the park. Slipped one under the clubhouse door, just to be petty. Step 4. Get the press. Called in a favor from a buddy I'd hauled office equipment for last year. He works at the local paper. Told him I had a story about HOA fraud with receipts. Literal receipts. He agreed to come, record the meeting, and observe. Said if it checked out, he'd run it next week. All that was left was to wait. Let Richard enjoy his little kingdom for 1 more week. I kept driving like normal, waved at neighbors, paid my fines, but inside, I was just counting down. 7 days until impact. I got to the meeting early, not because I was eager, but because I wanted Richard to see me sitting there when he walked in. Calm, waiting, holding a thick-ass manila envelope in my lap like a snake under a blanket. They held it at the clubhouse, same place they tore down my canopy from. There's something poetic about that. Usually, maybe 10 folks show up to these budget meetings. That night, over 60 chairs, standing room only, people packed shoulder to shoulder, some in lawn chairs out the back door. A couple folks brought snacks like it was movie night. One dude had a cooler. Richard walked in about 10 minutes late like some washed-up Caesar, scanning the room like he couldn't believe the peasants had learned to read. He cleared his throat at the mic. Well, this is a strong turnout. I almost smiled. First 20 minutes was boring HOA fluff, budget talk, reserve fund projections, upcoming beautification projects, the usual parade of vague PowerPoint numbers nobody can verify. Every time Richard said the word transparency, I could see Curtis clench his jaw. Then came Q&A. Richard tried to skip it, said we were tight on time, but a woman from the back yelled, "We made time. You just sit down and listen." Bless her. So I stood up, took the mic, said, "My name's Travis McAllen. I live on Maple Ridge. Some of you know me as the guy with the canopy. Others know me as the guy who got fined 15 grand for parking a truck I own on land I bought." You could feel the shift in the room. People were listening. But tonight isn't about the canopy. It's about what's been happening behind the curtain. I pulled out the packet, handed copies to Richard, the treasurer, the board members, gave one to the guy from the newspaper too. He was in the back, quietly filming on his phone. My lawyer said not to say too much, so I let the paper do the heavy lifting. I read a few highlights, just enough to get blood pumping. $34,000 in management stipends written out to Richard's name. Landscaping contracts funneled to 2 shell companies tied to his wife's family. Illegal bylaw changes that let him pass policies with 1 other vote. Payment approvals signed by himself. Then I hit them with the cherry on top. And here's audio from a trespassing incident on my property where a board member bragged about handling my structure without due process. That same night, my rig was damaged. I've got the repair receipts, $11,243. I didn't yell, I didn't point fingers, I just stood there and let the facts stack like bricks in a wall. Richard tried to speak, grabbed the mic. This is out of order, these are serious allegations. I didn't even respond, didn't need to, because by then the room was turning on him. Old Mrs. Patel from the corner house? She stood up and said, "You fined me for hanging my flag wrong, but you're stealing from all of us?" Another guy shouted, "You said you were a volunteer. You took 30 grand and called it a stipend?" Then a younger couple, barely out of their 20s, stood up and said they got a warning for letting their toddler's toys sit on the lawn for a day. Every frustration came out. It wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a purge. I looked at Richard and I swear for a second I saw panic, not anger, not pride, just a flicker of oh crap. Board members started sliding their chairs back one by one. The treasurer said, "I had no idea." Another one walked out entirely. Someone yelled, "Motion to suspend the board," and people clapped. Someone else yelled, "Motion to audit all HOA funds." And Curtis, calm as ever, just raised a hand and said, "Motion to vote on emergency leadership removal, per Article 4, Section 3 of the Charter." People literally stood up and applauded. It was beautiful. Richard tried to storm out, but not before grabbing his little binder of fake numbers. I leaned in as he passed and said, "Truck drivers read fine print too, counselor." He didn't say a word, just walked into the night while the crowd kept yelling his name. Next morning, I'm halfway through changing my oil when my phone starts lighting up like it just won the lottery. Turns out, that reporter buddy of mine, he didn't wait. Front page of the local paper's website. Truck driver uncovers HOA corruption. It's about control, not community. With a big photo of me standing next to what's left of my canopy, arms crossed, looking like I just dared somebody to find me again. The article blew up. Not just local folks either. Some bigger outlets picked it up later in the week. HOA horror stories are basically America's favorite guilty pleasure. It detailed everything. The money trails, the shell companies, the bylaw tampering, the intimidation tactics. They even quoted a few of my neighbors anonymously. One called Richard's leadership a petty dictatorship in khakis. And then it hit social media. Local Facebook groups went nuts. You'd have thought I was running for mayor. People posted their own HOA stories, screenshots, letters. Some guy even shared footage of Richard yelling at a teenager for parking a moped in the wrong spot. The video got more views than the mayor's last campaign ad. And the real kicker? Richard's name showed up in a follow-up article titled, "Former HOA President Investigated for Fraud and Misuse of Funds." Yep, the city opened an audit. Curtis turned over everything. Not just the shady payments, but the bylaw violations, the meeting quorums, even a few suspicious reimbursements Richard signed off on as both requester and approver. Turns out, when you try to run a 6-figure racket inside a suburban HOA and you do it on paper, someone eventually reads the paper. I heard through the grapevine he tried to play the victim card, claimed he was being harassed, said I incited a mob. But guess what? Nobody bought it. Not after the audio, not after the invoices, not after the neighbors started comparing notes and realizing they'd all been getting played for years. HOA members voted unanimously to remove him and freeze all discretionary spending until the audit was done. Temporary Oversight Committee got installed. Guess who they asked to join? Not me. Nope. I turned it down. Told them I wasn't interested in being part of the HOA. I just wanted it to stop hurting people. Let the retirees and school teachers and actual community folks run it for a change. Me? I went back to work. But I'll tell you what, that next weekend, I put the canopy back up, with help. I didn't even ask. Curtis showed up with a socket set. That couple down the street brought burgers. Some teenager I'd never seen before started holding up crossbeams like it was a barn raising. We rebuilt it in 2 hours flat. I even added a motion light, one of those that glows blue. Little reminder that there's always someone watching now. And Richard? His house went up for sale the next week. Real quiet, real fast. I saw the listing, charming leadership opportunity in a quiet neighborhood. Yeah, not anymore. It's been about 3 months since all that went down. The fines? Gone? The board? New? The truck? Parked right where it belongs, under a canopy stronger than ever, bolted into the slab like it dares someone to try again. HOA's quieter now. They still send out little newsletters, but they read more like friendly suggestions than marching orders. The new folks even hosted a block BBQ last month. Invited everyone. No agendas, no proxy votes, just burgers and music and neighbors remembering how to be neighbors again. I didn't make a big speech or anything, just showed up, ate a brat, talked shop with a guy who hauls RVs for a living. Curtis got a handshake line like a war hero, deserved every second of it. And Richard? Far as I know, he moved to a condo across town. One without an HOA, ironically. Maybe he finally figured out rules are easier to enforce when you're not actively breaking them yourself. I still get the occasional nod from folks walking by. Hey McAllen, appreciate what you did. Or, still got that spreadsheet? One guy dropped off a six-pack with a note that just said, integrity. Hard to find. Thanks. I didn't do it for thanks, didn't even do it for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said seeing Richard squirm wasn't satisfying. No, I did it because this is my home. I worked for it, bled for it, and I'll be damned if I let somebody roll over me with a clipboard and a fake smile. The rules, I respect them, but respect's a two-way street, and out here, I drive both directions. Now every morning I'm home, I drink my coffee in the shade of that canopy, watch the sun come up over my truck, hear the birds, smell the diesel from the preheater kicking on, and I just sit there, boots up, mug warm in my hand, thinking, this was worth every mile.